Welcome to All About Art. My name is Alexandra, and I'm an art historian, curator, and writer. Within this podcast, topics relating to art history, cultural policy, the art sector, as well as a large range of other art-related topics will be covered. Conducting critical discussions, having entertaining exchanges, or just enjoying some relaxing chats, All About Art is where you'll find it all. Join me in exploring and developing cultural discourse. Welcome to another episode of All About Art. In this episode, I sat down with co-founder of Unit London, Joe Kennedy. This episode is being launched a month after they celebrated their 10th anniversary of the gallery, and with that, Unit teamed up with All About Art to put on one of our signature All About Art networking events. There was an amazing turnout with over £600 raised for the charity hospital rooms. In this episode, I got to ask Joe about his push into entrepreneurship and how he got into the arts. We chat about how the gallery landscape has changed in the last 10 years, and how he thinks it will continue to change in the following 10. Listen on to hear me ask Joe about social media and NFTs, how the gallery chooses artists they work with, and so much more. Thank you, Joe, for coming on the podcast, and to the whole amazing team at Unit London for this fabulous collaboration. Before I dive in, I wanted to let you lovely listeners know that All About Art is on Patreon. So if you want some behind-the-scenes content, maybe a bit of merch, the chance to get one-on-ones with me and my guests, or you're simply wanting to support this project, I would be absolutely thrilled if you decided to sign up. You can do so through the link in the show notes. I also wanted to say thank you to those who have already signed up. Your support means the world, and it makes the further production, improvement, and growth of the podcast possible. And for that, I'm incredibly grateful. And now, on to the interview. Also, thank you to our sponsors at Synergy Associates, the art world tech gurus, for supporting this episode's production at their clubhouse on Pall Mall. You can find more about Synergy and their facilities in the show notes. Welcome to the podcast, Joe. I am happy to be sitting down with you in a big moment for Unit London. This year is the gallery's 10th anniversary, and to celebrate, you're putting on a variety of events, including collaborating with me on an All About Art networking event, which I'm obviously really thrilled about. But before we dive deeper into Unit, I want to first ask you about your background so that listeners can get to know you. So how did you get into the arts?
Well, really it started from a passion of mine. I was always fascinated by creative culture. So not just visual arts, but film, music. And then I kind of discovered art. Really, I think the first time I went to a museum was in Ireland at IMA in Dublin. And I remember seeing a Louis Le Brocq exhibition there when I was, probably 11 or 12 years old, didn't really know what I was looking at, and completely fell in love with it. And I think at that moment, I sort of unlocked something in me where I just realized how inspired I was by visual work and visual communication. I also realized that becoming an artist probably wasn't going to be a feasible career for me. There are lots of kind of barriers of access for creatives and artists who are practicing, but perhaps can't find the right channels or don't have the right connections or contacts to be able to articulate their work, even to be able to spend the time and the energy and the resources on developing their practice. And it's extremely competitive, but it's also extremely restrictive. So I decided to go off in a slightly different direction. I went into advertising, studied psychology at university. I've always been really interested in why people make decisions and human behavior. And advertising for me was kind of a way of staying creative and putting things out into the world that could have meaning and impact in a creative and maybe artistic way that didn't kind of pin me down into something that I didn't want to do and didn't put me into like a very vocational course. And so I basically after university, went to Australia, and I worked in an advertising agency there for a little while, and came back to London really inspired to to do something and create something. And when I came back, I bumped into one of my best friends from school. We had a kind of a catch up, and Johnny at the time was taking his work to galleries in London.
As an artist.
And was basically getting rebuffed. And we both had this experience of taking our work to galleries and trying to get into shows and not having any success. And it became very just frustrating, and then we would go to gallery shows. I remember that summer when I came back, we went to a bunch of shows across London of artists that we were really excited to see. And the experience was lacking somehow for us. We would go in and kind of leave almost deflated because the work that we were so excited to see was presented in a way or made us feel somehow like we weren't allowed to be there. And a lot of that came down to, I think, the gallery experience or the gallery design, the language that was used on the press release, the way that we were looked at and treated in the space. All of those kind of little triggers really kind of left us feeling like this could be done better somehow. There's another way of doing this. And that's what led us ultimately into starting the gallery 10 years ago now. Was kind of a frustration with the way that artists were being presented and the way that people like us who maybe weren't from the industry, we didn't have any kind of formal connections to the art world outside of sort of practicing as artists really. We didn't feel like we were being spoken to. And we knew that there was other people like us who shared the same passion for art and for artists and wanting to see work and discuss the work and be immersed in it, but didn't have the opportunity to, or didn't feel like they were invited to those places, or there weren't forums for them to have those discussions and conversations. So, we were like, let's just find a way to do it ourselves, and that's how the gallery came to be.
Yeah, my next question was going to be, when you started Unit 10 years ago, what was it that pushed you into entrepreneurship? And you have just answered that with basically, to summarize it in one word, it's frustration. It's frustration in looking at something that didn't exist that you really needed to bring into the art world. And thinking about Unit now, even those small triggers that you touched on earlier, the entry into the gallery, for example, the fact that you guys have a really big door that slides open, if I'm not mistaken. It's very easy to walk in. It's very open. You're always greeted. Your wall texts are always accessible in terms of language. It's not something that's incredibly convoluted. I studied art history, and even I look at gallery texts and I'm like, what is this? And so I think that all has a really, really positive impact on that experience of people coming in.
For sure. I think there's definitely a thing about the over-intellectualization of art. And I think there's obviously a place for kind of in-depth discourse and the intellectualization of it, and some work requires it more than others, perhaps. But I also think there's that initial gallery experience doesn't have to overwhelm the visitor. I think there has to be an entry point and an entry level, like a jump off point for people to feel like they're not somehow inferior or not smart enough to be able to understand the work. And so that's something that we work on a lot at the gallery is our communication, our verbal communication. The choice of language.
Guess that's where the psychology comes in.
Yeah, it does. Well, I think with art, really, what you're doing is essentially storytelling. And I've always been, obviously been very influenced by advertising. My time in working in advertising agencies, which are incredibly lucid, creative environments with super intelligent people, hilariously chaotic and fun, but also, very smart. And I've always wanted to kind of recreate that culture within a gallery setting, because being in an office like that was one of the first times I was really kind of exposed to a rigid office environment. It's my first probably my first serious job in an office, and I learned so much, and it was such a stimulating environment, and it's constantly generating ideas. And then you look at how musicians were being promoted, or how films were being promoted, or how fashion weeks were being handled, and the content and the marketing that was being done for those album launches or concerts or shows, whatever, so compelling and so engaging and really captured people's imagination and attention. You basically couldn't ignore it. If you got on the tube, you just see the posters everywhere, and there's smart ways of kind of getting people interested. And then the art shows that we want to go and see, we'd have to find out about it in a half-page ad in a newspaper or something. Yeah. And it's well, why can't artists be kind of celebrated and championed or promoted in the same way that a musician is, for example?
Yeah.
So that the idea of kind of engaging that mass audience was always something that we wanted to do. And I think that starts from the internal culture at the gallery, and with me and John's sort of approach and mindset to kind of telling the stories of our artists, and goes all the way through to how we communicate, our shows, how we write our press releases, all those things you said, they all kind of ladder up to that mission for us of engaging a mass audience and getting more people involved in the contemporary art market, or maybe not the market, but at least the contemporary art world. Someone needs to tear down those barriers, I think, and let people realize that actually, like, art is such an accessible, universal form of communication, and it's such a beautiful thing, and there's no such thing as important or not important art, really. I mean, all art is good art and all art is bad art at the same time, simultaneously, and that's kind of the beauty of it. So for us, it's really about how can we get more people involved? How can we get more people to understand that you don't have to push open that big heavy door in Mayfair. You don't have to feel inferior.
Yeah, you don't have to ring a buzzer.
Right. It should be the most natural thing. And I think the more people that we can get to engage with artists, the better.
Yeah. I feel like the gallery landscape can be something that's incredibly daunting, not only from a consumer's point of view or a visitor's point of view, but also from a business point of view because of the amount of galleries that are already in existence and the way that their business model works. How do you think that the gallery landscape has changed throughout the last decade since you founded Unit?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it's changed a lot. I mean, we came into the industry, I think, with a lot of blissful naivety. We had no. I feel
like that's everyone who starts a business at like a young age as well.
Right. And it's the best thing to have, because you're not burdened by any preconditions or conventions, or we weren't following a formula of how things should be done. We were, we had this frustration with our experiences of going to galleries or as artists and as visitors, and we wanted to do things our own way. So we had sort of a carte blanche, if you like, of how to approach this and how to do this, and we just followed our instincts. So yeah, I think the gallery world has certainly morphed from being more traditional to more digital, which is an obvious thing to say because every single industry has done so. But I think the art world was particularly slow to embrace new technology, and I think there's various reasons for that. There's both practical reasons and maybe ideological reasons also. Social media and kind of the online space sort of forces maybe transparency, or forces a two-way dialogue between, let's say, a gallery and its audience. And I think for a long time, galleries had this sort of privileged position of being able to dictate to audiences, and everything's invitation only. The narrative of the artist, the show, everything is sort of pushed through the mouthpiece of the gallery without much asking for any kind of feedback or response. It's kind of like it was a one-way, very dictatorial kind of setup. And I think social media provides a public forum where the people who are on there aren't necessarily invited by the gallery. They're not drinking the Kool-Aid of the gallery. They could be, they could have conflicting opinions, and those opinions have to be responded to or have to be acknowledged. And I think, it forces kind of some sort of degree of transparency. And I think that's maybe one of the big transformational shifts that I would credit social media for in the art world, is kind of shifting the ability for galleries and art institutions perhaps to kind of control the narrative so much and be entirely inoculated from feedback or discourse. And I think ultimately what that leads to is obviously more accessibility. And I do think, today versus 10 years ago, because of perhaps social media and other factors, I think the art world is a much more inclusive place. We have much better representation within the industry, both from a sort of collector standpoint and from an artistic standpoint. And I think, I would credit social media in large part for those positive changes that we've seen. There's still a long way to go, and the industry is still clinging to certain old, antiquated kind of value systems and belief systems and economic models even. But I don't think they will last much longer. I think there's been a really deep shift in kind of people's wants and desires, and that kind of pushes through into collector habits and collector opinions, which then ultimately does push through into kind of what's being shown in the galleries. I think now versus 10 years ago, it's a much more representative and diverse landscape, which is only a good thing. And I think that's probably one of the biggest changes I've seen in the last 10 years.
And hopefully it'll continue in that direction as well.
Indeed.
Speaking about one of the biggest shifts in the art world in recent years is the rise of the NFT. Well, NFT, blockchain, and Web3.
Right.
I had NFT in my head, and then I looked at my notes and I was like, oh, wait, there's more. I haven't really spoken to anyone on the podcast about this yet. However, your gallery is one of the only ones that I know of that is involved in this. Can you tell me about why you decided to take that leap, especially amongst all of the controversy that NFTs ignited in the sector?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, in 2013, when we started the gallery, nobody knew who we were, and we were operating out of a little pop-up space.
In Seven Dials, right?
It was actually in Chiswick. It was in West London.
Oh.
So it's super...
For some reason, I thought somewhere I read Seven Dials.
Seven Dials was definitely a big part of our story. I think in the first 6 years of the gallery's existence, we had, I think, at least 15 spaces from empty shops. The first one was an empty charity shop. Then we had empty office spaces. We had other empty retail units that we would just pop up in for a couple of weeks and get kicked out and then have to find somewhere else.
I love that.
It was a very nomadic kind of thing for a while. And it was just the two of us, and it was very much kind of, it was a lot of fun looking back on it. And it was a beautiful time in many ways, but it was also just crazy to be kind of kicked out of space and then 2 weeks trying to find somewhere else and maintain that. But yeah, I mean, as the gallery started to kind of gain repute and as we started to sell things and people started to know who we were, we kind of became synonymous with the use of social media. Lots of galleries were really shocked that, you could technically sell art through social media. And there was newspaper articles about us that were literally like the kids selling art on social media. And we were happy to be in a newspaper, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, it felt a little bit reductive because we wanted people to focus on our artists and the programming and what we were doing. But the story, people kept talking about basically our use of social media because for a lot of the art world, I think it was seen as somehow revolutionary. To us, obviously, it wasn't revolutionary in any way. Is that we didn't feel like we were pioneering or anything. It just made sense to us because Instagram is a tool of our time. But the reaction to from sort of the traditional art world and the established art world to us as we started to gain a reputation was probably one of disdain to some degree. There wasn't like a mass sort of celebration of our approach and how we were marketing artists and sort of building our gallery. And when we moved into our space in Mayfair, that was a huge, huge, huge risk for us. And it was our first permanent space, the first space that we could actually call a home. And it basically nearly entirely broke us because for 6 years we were doing pop-ups and trying to save up to eventually find somewhere permanent. And when we moved in there, we had zero in the bank account. We spent everything that we'd saved in those 6 years.
What a risk.
So it was a huge, huge risk.
Calculated risk, paid off?
I mean, it was the best, looking back now, it was the best decision we ever made, you know, but it was a really scary time. And when we moved in there was a lot of attention because we were 26 years old. There was probably 4 of us in the team and people were like, who are these guys? And like, how have they got here? And I think there was that, like I say, there was a reaction from the industry that wasn't necessarily embracing of our approach. I think looking at the ecosystem now and the fact that every gallery has Instagram, and if you don't have these social media channels, you're not using kind of digital storytelling for your artists, you're basically doing a disservice to your artists because it's not really in tune with the way that the world works today. And so there was this, I think, probably a fear-based reaction to what we were doing. And we felt that palpably, and it's interesting because when NFTs and Web3 kind of burst onto the scene, which was like, it really happened. It came into the art world consciousness, obviously, through the Beeple sale, because that's when the art world obviously sit up and take notice when there's money involved. I think the same reaction that I saw back in 2013 to what we were doing with social media, I saw with the Web3 space. And when I looked into it, I kind of became fascinated with the infrastructure of blockchain and what it could do for artists and do for the industry. On a technical level or on an economic level, the ability for blockchain to be able to split payments immediately and provide royalties for artists in perpetuity for their work is completely game-changing. I mean, there's no technology that exists that could have such a transformational shift on how the industry is operated and run. Because it has been for so long such an inequitable system. And blockchain is the technological answer to that. So that was kind of what pulled us into it in the first place. And also just this sort of understanding that, things are only heading in one direction, and we genuinely see that as the future. Then delving more into the digital artists who have been using the technology for probably quite a long time under the radar. And these aren't the artists who were being necessarily talked about in headlines in the newspapers in 2021 at the time when NFTs were booming. These are artists who were basically quietly working away as professors or as computer scientists, creative coders, which is this really fascinating kind of subsection of artists who are using coding language to build their work. And was just blown, when you meet these guys and you speak to some of these artists, what they're doing is just incredible, and so they have had to struggle under the sort of stigma of being a digital artist for so long. And this technology is the technology that unlocks the ability for people to really collect their work in depth and for them to build careers for themselves and be recognized as artists rather than just, a lot of them are sort of resigned to making work for commercial brands.
So like illustrators.
Like exactly, yeah. So after meeting some of these artists like Casey Reese, who we're doing his first solo exhibition in the UK next year, which is a physical exhibition. Tyler Hobbs, amazing generative artists. Itzel Shells, Krista Kim. There's so many artists now that we work with in the Web3 space who are just incredibly talented and inspiring people. And I think, the mission of our gallery is about opening up doors and creating access for artists who maybe have been sidelined. And I would put digital artists in that category to a large degree. A lot of them have struggled for a long time and, with reputation and access and opportunity. And so it made total sense for us to kind of to start a Web3 program. And I feel like we're really taking a leading stance in pushing the Web3 space forward and trying to contextualize the artists who are working in that space by introducing them to curatorial teams, commissioning writing around their work, and also just communicating what they do in a level and in a way that maybe people can understand that is sort of slightly removed from their coding language, sort of jargon, and into more sort of layman terms. But once you do start to understand what they're doing, it is fascinating because coding, like painting, is a language, and it's something that has traditionally been seen as, I guess, something goal-oriented, where you are writing code for a website page or for a product or a piece of technology. These guys are writing open-ended code, which has like immense variation in their outputs and is entirely creative. So, yeah, it's a space that we're really excited about, like both from an infrastructure kind of technical point of view. I think it can have amazing impacts on the industry, but also for the artists who are creating amazing work in that space.
If we think about how things have been developing in the past couple of years, when I was at university, I used to work at Sotheby's. And I remember seeing Mario Klingemann's AI-generated artwork, and that was incredibly groundbreaking and interesting. And that was something that actually really caused me to look into it a little bit more. And I actually wrote my undergraduate dissertation on artificial intelligence and art. This was before the whole big 2021 NFT art world boom. Yeah. I finished my degree in 2020. However, I took art historical theories and I took that and applied that to authenticity and authorship with technological reproduction, with collaborating with technology. So I looked at Mario Klingemann, but I also looked at Jake Elwes, who actually has something on at the V&A at the moment, also something that was generated through artificial intelligence and that technology, as well as Sugwen Chung, who collaborates with AI, but also robotics. And that's another, step in that process. Yeah. And that was all incredibly interesting to think about that development with digital technology. And so I think that it's really interesting how you've put it and how you've described why you guys chose to take that step and why you believe in that. And then also, I think that it's something that you said that was really interesting was that when you have that Web3, I guess, exhibition, is that a good way of me describing it? Yeah. Then you put in the same amount of surrounding effort, i.e. commissioning a text or working with curators to talk about that type of communication of the artwork, and you treat it like a physical exhibition. Yeah. And I think that really adds to it as well, instead of just saying just quote unquote, like, this whole argument of, right click save and I have your artwork or whatever.
Yeah.
It's
You need to get beyond that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But so it's difficult for people to get beyond that, I think.
Absolutely.
For lots of people, it's stigmatized, basically.
Yeah. And I think thinking about creativity and not just the physical output of it, as in painting, and why that's been so almost venerated as a medium sometimes because of the physicality or things like that. I think that it's interesting to look beyond that and talk about it. Moving back to speaking about the founding of Unit London, what are 3 things that you wish that you would have done differently, or maybe 3 things that you were happy that you did during the first few years? The reason why I'm asking this is with the aim of getting some advice out there for maybe some budding art entrepreneurs and founders who may be listening.
Got it. That's a great question. What would we have done differently? I mean, for us, when we didn't have the option really to do anything differently because it was so belts and braces. And I think whenever I speak to kind of young gallerists or, a lot of the time actually kind of young artists or young curators come into the space and they want to know kind of how to kind of develop a project or, open a show. And I think there is a tendency for all of us to kind of think that we need to have a fully polished idea and have everything ready to go, and a space and a team and a concept and a brand and a logo and everything ready to go before you start. And I think there's a sense of inertia that comes with that because, you can spend forever trying to build it all and make it perfect and never actually do anything. And I think that maybe the benefit that we had when we started was that we had no other option but to just go for it. And a lot of what we've learned on the job. So, we didn't have a physical space. So we went walking the streets, literally looking for empty shops or empty units, whether it was a building site or an office space or whatever, that we could mount a show in. And we would just find the landlord and approach them and see if we could go in there for a week or 2. And that kind of, that attitude of, we're going to make something work here. We're going to make it work, even if it's not perfect. We'll find a way, I think was foundational to what we've done. Obviously now things are much more planned out for us, and we have an amazing team who are able to kind of carry the mission of the gallery forward. But
little shout out there to Kelsey and Rochelle for getting you on the podcast absolutely. And communicating Kelsey with me.
We have such an incredible, the team of the gallery is just so incredible. And the most rewarding thing really is to see people who really kind of believe in trying to change the industry somehow and create more accessibility, who are all working together like for this common goal of what we're trying to achieve with the gallery. It's the most humbling and rewarding thing for us. But I think for people starting out and wanting to kind of get into the industry, I think there is no real formula, I would say. And that's the beauty of it. I think if you go out and if you do walk the streets of central London, you'll see lots of empty shops. And if you have if you just find out who the landlord is, approach them, give them a call, do a pop-up shop, that will get you started.
Yeah. And no perfectionism.
No perfectionism, I think, is a great thing. Yeah. I think perfectionism it is the inertia. It can kill creativity also. Something actually we speak about a lot with some of our artists is the ability to let go and kind of allow things to develop naturally. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's not necessarily going to be perfect, but let it happen and learn from it. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question at all, but
it does. It does. Absolutely. It may not have been 3 things, but it was one that really came through and it was very clear, i.e., yeah. Well, I guess to summarize, if we think about it in a practical way, which it doesn't necessarily need to be, I think that all of this has been really useful. And I think as someone who, personally with the podcast, it is in a way having a bit of an entrepreneurial mindset, right? And if I would have been as much of a perfectionist, I am a perfectionist. I really struggle with it and I need to let it go because I would have never launched this if I would have let myself be held back.
Right.
I sat on the first 5 episodes for I think 2 months or a month and a half before I said, okay, I'm ready to announce this, to let it be out in the world.
Yeah.
Because I was afraid. I was afraid of what people might think. I was afraid of how people would react, if people would think that my voice is annoying or maybe I say something stupid. And in reality, sometimes people did come back to me and say I really disagreed with this, but never has it ever been like this big horrible thing. Like it's either constructive criticism and I can take it and it's like, okay, I can improve. Or I understand that, hey, maybe I'm not going to take this on board.
Right.
So it like that comes within not being a perfectionist. And then also like a bit of, I guess bootstrapping is not the correct term because that is an actual term within like entrepreneurship, but more just like getting down and dirty, calling landlords, going around London, finding your opportunities that way.
Yeah.
And really just going out there and getting it.
Yeah. I think, like lots of, even like the stories of the big galleries and the big gallerists, a lot of the time, I mean, Larry Gagosian is maybe,
an exception.
Well, I mean, I guess he's someone who's kind of come from, he started selling posters and then has turned it into a huge empire.
Yeah.
I just think there's that entrepreneurial spirit has to exist in our industry, because as we've grown the gallery, you also start to realize that there are barriers and structures that kind of, I don't know if I'm thinking this actually myself in my own head, but structures that kind of suppress sort of younger galleries or certain galleries from kind of competing at a top level. I mean, if a young successful gallery starts representing great artists, often it's a matter of time before a big gallery comes along and goes, hey, that's a great artist. Here's £1 million and a new studio. And it can be very difficult for young galleries to compete. And I think the way that we've kind of navigated this is just by really not trying to conform to the rules of the industry and trying to carve out our own path. Because I feel like if we were to play into the terms of the existing system, we would just become cannibalized, and we wouldn't be able to compete with the resource and the money, the scale of some of the bigger operations. So I think by kind of doubling down on our own instincts and our own way of doing things, and a lot of that does come down to the things we were just talking about, like being entrepreneurial, being go-getters, being passionate. By kind of doubling down on those things, I think we give ourselves our own identity, and we're able to articulate kind of an alternative way of representing artists and creating impact for our artists. So yeah, I do feel like there are systems that kind of are designed to suppress, and we do kind of exist in somewhat of a monopoly system where there's big galleries who represent fantastic artists, and we have a museum sector which often shows the same types of artists who are represented from the same handful of galleries who are collected by the same handful of collectors. And it's really important for us, I think, to try and break that system and introduce new collectors, new artists, new perspectives into the industry and expand it. That's really kind of that's at the baseline, I think, of what we do. Talking
about having this entrepreneurial mindset in the arts, I always say this, but I feel like our sector is actually very tiny in comparison to other sectors. And I think that if more people would come in with that drive to change things and with doing things a little bit differently, with bringing in new or revised structures into business, into art business in a way, then I think that we could actually really develop a larger sector, a more thriving sector. That's kind of what I'm trying to do on the podcast, is to encourage people to come in and either, if you want to go be a curator or an arts writer, or you want to work in a gallery, awesome. You have the tools and a little bit more knowledge to do that, listening to people talk about their jobs. But also you can learn more about the sector and think about how you want to make a difference or how you want to bring in your ideas. Yeah. And I think that is so incredibly valuable. And I'm very much into that.
Yeah, I think there's never been more opportunity, right? I mean, I mean, like forums like this, like your podcast, being able to broadcast your and also kind of like pull down the veneer over the art world and let people see that actually it's a human thing. And there are people out there who are hustling and pushing forward and trying to advance maybe a new perspective on things. Can only help. It's all these things kind of ladder up to real change. And I mean, obviously you worked in galleries before and big galleries, and
I'm still in one now, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, full-time job.
Oh, okay. Well, so you're doing this like after hours, I guess, which maybe why. Yeah, which is why we're here slightly after hours.
Yep.
But I think it's in order to kind of really pull down that veneer and get more people involved in the industry. It's things like this, I think, that really allow that to happen.
Yeah.
And
thank you.
People have never had that level of exposure, I think, to and the opportunity to have access to content like what you're producing. So I think it's a really great thing.
Thanks. I think it also ties in with what you said earlier about like going on Instagram. I mean, Spotify, Apple podcasts in general, this is all a part of that development online.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't be able to disseminate this information for free. I mean, bar my own time and your time and everyone else's efforts. But you know what I mean? Like I can distribute it and send it out to hundreds of people who can listen and actually hear that without any cost to them. And it's something that's incredibly accessible for most people.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a question because I'm sure that many people are wondering, how do you choose who you work with? And I want to ask this question in relation to artists that you work with, but also in relation to independent professionals that you work with, such as curators, because you do work with curators as well.
Yeah. I mean, also, I would maybe even extrapolate that also to collectors, because we've worked with a lot of collectors over the years, and you start to realize certain intentions and motivations for collectors. And we're now probably much more selective than we were as to who we work with on the collector side as well. Because the ecosystem, from the artists to our staff and our members of the team, the curators, it's all interlinked. But for the artists, we always look for artists who have an original language and sense of purpose. We're quite lucky that we don't have a investors or a committee that we have to get sign off from, let's say, to represent an artist. So for Johnny and I, we've always had the same taste. We finish each other's sentences on a daily basis. We've always been so aligned like that in terms of the art that we love, the artist that we love, creative direction, everything. And usually for us, it's a very instinctive reaction. Like we have a visceral reaction to something that we see, which is kind of the first step. We have to have that kind of like punch in the gut when we see an artist for the first time. It has to have that impact on us. Otherwise, we just don't pursue it. And from there, then it's kind of delving more into kind of who the artist is and their story and what that language is, what that visual language is for them. What's the purpose behind it? What are they looking to achieve with their work? What are they looking to say with their work? And I do think we live in a time where, because of all these beautiful tools that we've been speaking about and Instagram and the access that we have to artists, there's a lot out there. And also I think it's easy for young artists to be quickly influenced by things that are trendy or that are hyped or that, might sell well or are currently in vogue. And I think there are certain artists who are able to kind of inoculate themselves from those temptations, or, are able to kind of really kind of look inwards and just carve their own path regardless of what's going on around them. So they're the artists that we tend to look for. And then beyond that, then it's, if we love the message and we start to think about the ambition of the artist, and if their vision for their work and their career is aligned with the hunger and the passion and the vision that we have. And they're really the key things, I would say. Some of it is hard to articulate, to be honest, because, there's certain artists that we see, and for some inexplicable reason, Johnny and I are both obsessed, and then we'll have to kind of post-rationalize later, kind of like, why we love this art so much.
Sometimes that gut instinct is, you have to follow that too.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We're definitely big believers in that. And then in terms of the curators that we work with, some of the contributors we work with, even the team at the gallery, again, I think everyone that we work with and that works with us is interested in communicating the messages of artists to a broad audience. Like, I think that's really the key thing. If you break down the gallery's mission into one objective, it's to create more exposure for artists to the widest possible audience. And so I think every single person that we work with at every level is interested in that same goal. At a very kind of rudimentary level, that's the common denominator between everyone, from the staff to the artist to the curators. And I think, on the curatorial side, we've worked with some incredible people and some incredible names, writers, authors, historians, lecturers, curators. And I think the work they do is so important. For a long time, we basically couldn't afford to work with sort of arts professionals who are able to contextualize work from our artists. But it's something that we do very, very regularly now. I mean, we have a program called Voices, which Kelsey at the gallery is running, which is really an ideas-driven program that works a lot with contributors, curators, whether it's commissioned essays, pieces of writing, performance. And
I think there was something recently with Hetty Judah.
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken. And actually, I think a couple of my friends, Flora Bradwell, for example, was also included in that. And I was very happy to see that. Very cool.
An amazing show. Well, yeah, I mean, 5 or 6 shows this year have been real standouts for us. And the beautiful thing about the Voices program is that money raised from sales from the exhibitions go towards a charity that is selected by the artists or the curator of the show. It's actually a program that started during COVID as a way to kind of create more kind of thought-driven and idea-driven, impact-driven programming. So, but yeah, I think fundamentally the thing that ties everyone together, the thing that we always look for is the want and desire to bring art to as many people as possible. That will always be our goal, and that's why, you know, scale for us is really important. Mass audience is really important, and the only way that you can speak to a mass audience is by, you know, creating forums and places that people feel welcome, that don't exclude people. We want to pull down barriers rather than put barriers up, always, at all times. And yeah, I think everybody that we work with, internally and externally, they all have that same drive and same motivation.
Yeah. My penultimate question: where do you see Unit London heading in the next 10 years?
I think about this a lot, believe it or not.
I do believe it. I think because it's your business. Yes, I do believe it.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think just it's still really difficult for us to accept that it's been 10 years, because it still feels like yesterday when we were just
like 22 and
22 in our 20s.
Wait, how old were you when you started it?
We were 22.
Oh, okay. That was just a lucky guess on my end.
We were literally 22. I think I was maybe 23. Johnny was 22. I was 23. And yeah, you know, and it's so different now to what it was. And we had no support really in starting a gallery. Like, our friends and everyone was like, what do you mean you're starting a gallery, kind of thing? Because I think not having the access to the industry and not having worked in the industry, not having family in the industry or any connections, does prohibit you really from understanding it. And people are a bit kind of shocked that you're like interested in getting involved in doing something that,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah. When I said I was going to study art history, everyone was like, but how are you going to make money? And I'm like, I love it. Okay, just leave me alone.
Yeah.
Thank God my mom was like, go for it. And that's all I needed.
Fueled by passion. It's just the best way. I
mean,
yeah. It's hard for us to believe. I mean, but the next 10 years for us is if the first 10 years have been defined by maybe disruption, you could say, starting from the outside and kind of now working our way inside the industry. I mean, when we started, we were complete outsiders. Obviously, no one knew who we were and everything. Now we almost have one foot in the door, and we work with some of the biggest institutions and curatorial voices and artists and collectors in the world. So we've come a really long way, but we still feel like we're just getting started. And that's why it still feels like we've been doing this for a year, not 10. But for us, I think we really want to kind of scope out the next 10 years as being doubling down really on our support of our core mission of championing creativity and bringing art to a much broader audience. And there's ways, I think, that we're going to iterate on that. And a lot of it centers really on kind of giving back to the art ecosystem and trying to cultivate the art ecosystem, because now I think we're probably in more of a position to do that. Obviously, the first 10 years are about keeping the lights on and finding a permanent space and, you know, creating a viable business, which took a while, by the way. The first couple of years were not healthy. But, you know, I think now we're in a position where we are able to kind of expand the team and be much more intentional with our decision making. And a big part of that is going to be in kind of cultivating kind of good practice in the industry, providing opportunities for artists from non-conventional backgrounds, whether that's through grants or prizes. Again, sort of programs like Voices, I think, really help with that are ideas driven, that are kind of bringing maybe non-conventional or unrepresented artistic voices to the fore, and then trying to generate funds for initiatives, charities, projects that are trying to make change in their respective fields.
Similar to what you're doing with the 10-year anniversary with our event, all proceeds are going to hospital rooms.
Yeah. Exactly. I think that's definitely something that I think, well, I would like to ultimately be the thing that defines the gallery, you know, is if we really want to make change, we need to create these initiatives, commit to these initiatives, and take a leading role in giving back to the community in the right way and supporting artists who need that support and need the platform. Because I think one of the things that really drives us is the idea that great art exists everywhere, sometimes in like the most surprising places. It doesn't just exist in art schools, and it certainly doesn't start there. So it's about identifying where that incredible talent lies and then being able to support it. So that's something that I think we're going to be looking at really for the next 10 years. And maybe it's not having 10 galleries around the world, which is maybe what I wanted 10 years ago.
Yeah. I was going to ask about, well, I wasn't going to ask because like, I wasn't going to pry, but like international expansion,
Yeah, it's always been on the cards for us. I think over the last 5 or 6 years, there's been opportunities for us to expand internationally in open spaces. And thank God we didn't actually, because just the operational cost of running multiple spaces and the stress of it all would have been too much for us at the time. And I think we sort of took maybe the more sensible route of not running before we could walk and just really establishing the processes of the gallery. And I feel like we're now in a place where we can take that next step. And hopefully by the time our event comes around next week, we'll have some really exciting news to share, because we are working on something pretty exciting, which is not another gallery, but it's maybe a more interesting way of us being able to kind of execute on our mission and kind of provide support and opportunity for artists who need it. So hopefully by then we'll be able to announce something. It's been something that we've been working on for quite a while now.
Oh, well, I'm very excited. Can't wait. It's going to be just over a week.
Just over a week, yeah. I should have had the news today, but I didn't. And I don't want to jinx anything.
Damn. Okay. All right. Fine. I'll wait. Okay. Well, finally, to end it, a fun question. And I ask all of my guests this who come on the podcast, and every single time they say that it's such a difficult one to answer. If you could pick one artist from art history to have dinner with, who would it be and why?
Oh my word. Oh my God. I want to say maybe René Magritte, just because I studied him in French at school and really studied his work. And I feel like it's that kind of conceptual aspect is something that really is still very relevant today. But that's a very, very good question.
It's hard, isn't it?
It's so hard.
Because there's so many amazing people. But I feel like Magritte is a very good, I think that would definitely be up in my top favorites as well, because surrealism and thinking about that as well. And I mean, just that whole entire movement was so interesting. I'm a big fan of Peggy Guggenheim and stuff, but that whole entire group of people, just fabulous.
Who would be yours?
Oh, no, I don't answer that
question.
You
don't do it.
I only ask the question. I don't answer.
It's such a great question. I mean, it's also the dinner guest question is also, I find it's so hard to actually kind of identify one or two people from history, because there's always such a rich tapestry,
Yeah, it's quite tough. But thank you so much for answering that, and also for coming on the podcast and for sharing your experience and expertise.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, it's been really nice, and really looking forward to next week as well.
And that is it for today on All About Art. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a rating or a review, as it helps more people discover the show. Also, feel free to share with your friends, or if you share on social media, tag me and get in touch. Thank you so much for listening.